We are only a few days away from the Charlotte Regional Championships, and today I wanted to talk about the 10 best Pokemon heading into this event. Kicking us off here, we have the best Pokemon in the format, and that is Flutter Mane. Now, Flutter Mane does have a couple sets it can run. As a matter of fact, I've got 4 different sets here that we're going to show off. There are a couple other ones that I think are also decent, but these are the main 4 that I really want to touch on. The very first one here is the Choice Specs Terra Fairy set. Now, this is a very simple Flutter Mane set. This is just what I would call a very standard version of the Pokemon. You can definitely change it up. There are definitely, a bulkier variant, which I'll show you guys in a second as well. And of course, as well, there's like faster variants, and it really just kind of depends on what your team needs. But this is just the Moonblast, Dazzling Gleam, set. Basically, these are your 2 main stab moves. They're the moves you'll want to be clicking almost always. We also have Shadow Ball there as well, just because obviously it's our other, primary stab move. And of course, Icy Wind is just a fantastic version of secondary speed control for most teams. The bulk here with the 68 116 is essentially just what a lot of people call the standard Flutter Mane. This basically allows you to live things like Adamant Ice Spinner always, right? From a Chien-Pao, which is obviously very good. 116 special attack here is just hitting our bump. This is a mon that doesn't necessarily need to, specifically calc for anything offensively. It just wants to deal as much damage as possible. Because one of the best ways to look at Flutter Mane is this is not necessarily a sweeping Pokemon. Obviously, it can definitely, sweep if put in the right circumstances. But this is a mon that can kind of just break through teams, right? You pair it up with something like, say, Tailwind or Redirection. You click 2 Dazzling Gleams, all of a sudden you've just dealt massive damage to the opponent's team, and then it basically just sets, the rest of your team up for success. And then essentially it is just a pump into, obviously 4 into the speed F here, and the rest into the speed stat. Now, again, you can definitely adjust this if you want to make it faster, maybe make it bulkier. There's definitely variants to it. What I'll show you guys here is just this is the super bulky variant. So you drop it down to the 36 special attack here. This essentially just hits that first initial bump. We run this up to 157, run this up to here, and then basically dump the rest here. Now, this is considered a very bulky version of Flutter Mane. It basically allows you to live a lot of things on the defensive end. For example, you can live opposing, Flutter Mane Shadow Balls. You can also, I believe, live Adamant Icicle Crashes, I think, off the top of my head. Haven't actually calculated with this in a while, but that's basically what it is. In my opinion, personally, this is a little too slow. I think having my Flutter Mane only at 171 is very awkward. It does basically kind of speed creep that tier of that, base 168, where a lot of people try to, speed creep Landorus Incarnate. But I do think running it a bit faster is a bit better, or at least, for my personal playstyle. Because of that, I do recommend running just this set here. It is very standard, but it is obviously very solid. Now we have the Speed Booster set. So basically, this is the exact same set we saw before, except now we have Protect and a Speed Booster, Booster Energy here. The bulk is the exact same. The move I decided to drop on this set is Shadow Ball. Now, I personally tested this set a lot. This is the set I used and took to Brisbane a couple months ago. This was just my personal favorite way to play it. Now, mine at the time was a little bit more offensive. I did have it drop down to 190 speed and ran this up to a little bit more special attack. Essentially, the reason it's been changed up now, we run 194, is because Iron Boulder now hits 193. And Speed Booster Iron Boulder is obviously a bit of a threat, right? It's a Pokemon that can definitely threaten a lot of damage onto Flutter Mane. And also too with its, its Mighty Cleave basically breaking through Protect, it can definitely threaten, low HP Flutter Mane. So I do think if you're going to go Speed Booster, making sure you just outspeed that mon is very important, especially because it is only a couple extra points. But then we have the Special Attack Booster set. Now, this is a set basically ripped straight from Alex Underhill, I believe it was, from the Portnoy Regional Championship. Again, this is just his exact set here. This is the Special Attack Booster. Because we're Special Attack Booster, we put Shadow Ball back on in place of Icy Wind. But for the bulk here, we ended up basically, just pumping it all into the physical defense. Now, this defensively does not do as much as the last set we obviously just looked at, but it does give you that little bit of extra speed that obviously, 1, allows you to speed type things like Adamant Chien-Pao, but 2, also put you in a position where people who are running that, little bit bulkier Flutter Mane, you are a little bit faster than them. And because of that, I do think it's definitely a set worth looking at. The main issue with this set really is you're going to have to take a lot of defensive risks, right? Because now all of a sudden, an Adamant Ice Spinner can KO you with this kind of set, right? There are some other things as well that can pick you up that couldn't before when you're running a bit of bulkier set like this. So do keep that in mind, but obviously, that little bit of extra speed can be the difference between you going first and, basically getting KO'd before you can move. And then the final set here, it's a very simple one. It's just the Focus Sash set. The thing with Flutter Mane, right, is it does one job, but it does it very well. It is just one of the best typings in the game offensively, and its job is basically just to deal big damage. You can run Timid on this set. You could also run Modest. It's really up to you. You could also opt to drop something like Dazzling Gleam or, Shadow Ball in place of something like Trick Room. I think is honestly pretty solid. Flutter Mane is also a decent taunt mon as well because it is very fast. But yeah, they are basically, in my opinion, 4 of the, the better sets for Flutter Mane, which is obviously, arguably the best mon in the game right now. Now, speaking of, obviously, its competition for number 1 here, we have Chien-Pao. Now, Chien-Pao, thankfully, is a very simple mon. This is a Pokemon that basically wants to run Focus Sash because it is so fragile, yet so fast. And 2, its, Terra typings are pretty simple. For this set here, we have Terra Ghost, but I do think Terra Stellar, as you guys can... Oh, that's Steel. That's meant to say Terra Stellar. I do think Stella obviously is also a very, very good option, and we'll get into that in a second. Essentially, EVs really quickly, we're just max. If you want, you can run Jolly. I'm personally a huge fan of Adamant because I like that little bit of extra damage, but Jolly obviously does put you in situations where you can win the speed tie, so I do think that is definitely a very solid option. I'm also a bigger fan of Ice Spinner. I will almost always run Ice Spinner unless I'm pairing with Chien-Pao, so with Rillaboom, because obviously you don't want to, break your own terrain. But the set's simple, right? We have the Ice Spinner, we have the Sucker Punch. Sacred Sword is just amazing coverage and protect. It's very, very good. And these 4 points in defense, for those who don't know, is very, very important for the Urshifu calcs. I believe it's like Choice Scarf Urshifu has a chance of KOing you if you're something like this. But if you go this, it can't KO you, at least without things like Turret and Rain, which is obviously very, very important. And then just switching over here, the set is basically the exact same, except we switched out for Icicle Crash. And again, I think if you are running Crash, you can definitely opt to run for Jolly. I do think it's definitely very, very solid. It just comes down to if you kind of want to risk that speed tie or not. I personally like having that little bit of extra damage, and I kind of play around the fact I'm a bit slower. But again, it's entirely up to you. And Terra Stella 2 is very, very cool on Chien-Pao, simply because this is a mon that, it has, 3 offensive coverage moves. So just the ability to get 3 different boosts off the Terra Stella, I do think is very, very solid. And then the final one here, I believe that is in contention for the #1 best Pokemon in the game, is Ogerpon Wellspring. This one has an incredibly good matchup into a lot of the metagame, especially, with how good it is into things like Incineroar, even Flutter Mane, and of course Urshifu Rapid Strike being the main one it's really, really good into. Now this set here I do call basically the very, very standard bulky support set. As you can see here, we've got Ivy Cudgel and Horn Leech, basically your best stab move plus recovery. We have Spiky Shield and Follow Me. Very, very simple here. We've got as much HP as we can get. I'm a big fan of going even numbers. I've said that in the past. Essentially, it's just a little bit nicer when you do, talking about things like, Pollen Puffs and all that kind of stuff, right? Attack, we just hit the first bump because we want this one to still do a little bit of damage, especially because we are forced to tear it into one of our own stabs. And then from there, basically, it's kind of just a pump into the defensive stats. I've gone 2, points here into the speed stats simply because I want to outspeed Ogerpons that are only doing 1, but I really don't want to invest too much speed into this one, as I do think going for a set like this is very, very important, because it does give you a much better role at living things like, a D9, Terra Normal E-Speed, for example. And really when it comes to the Spadef here, I just like, kind of having the numbers at least as close to, each other as possible, especially too when this mon does get a special defense boost from its Terra. I do think rolling it up just that little bit, getting a nice even number is obviously very, very nice. Now, the second set I did throw in here is a little bit of a faster set and a Swords Dance set as well. I do think SD is very, very good on this mon. You could also run a speedier set like this as well on the support variant and run it just pretty slow, like run it down to like say 4, for example, and then kind of just pump into like the defensive stats here. I also think that is definitely still a very, very solid set. But because we have Swords Dance on this set, I have just kind of maxed it out and basically just left it there. I do think Swords Dance Ogerpon is actually very, very good. I do think it's definitely a bit slept on right now. But in saying that, I do think the support variant with, the Follow Me is also just insanely good right now. But essentially the speed stat as well, I'll quickly throw in there. Kind of touched on it with the Flutter Mane. This is essentially to kind of speed creep that Landorus Incarnates here, making sure you outspeed all base 100s and base 101s. But yeah, definitely a very, very solid set. And I do, personally like a little bit of extra speed on mine. But obviously, especially on a set like this, having that little bit of extra physical bulk can definitely go a long way. Now, speaking of Urshifu Rapid Strike, one of the best mons in the game, this mon here is absolutely incredible. Now, thankfully with Urshifu, I'll quickly touch on the EVs here. I'm a huge fan of just going super offensive Urshifu, especially in the current metagame. Obviously, we're still early into the meta, so maybe, things will change up a little bit, and maybe we'll definitely see some bulkier Urshifus as we go on. But I'm just a huge fan of the Adamant 252, 252 sets here. On this set here in particular, we have Choice Scarf. On this one over here, we have the Mystic Water. Terra Water obviously is just fantastic. I think Scarf plus Terra Water is just insane. If you pair this thing up with like things like Tornadus with Rain Dance, this mod just does stupid amounts of damage. Obviously, we have the Surging Strikes here in close combat being its 2 primary stab moves. U-Turn is obviously great because it gives you a super effective move into things like Ogerpon Wellspring. And the interesting one here is Coaching. Now, Coaching is a move that I think is actually very, very cool on Urshifu Rapid Strike, because if your opponent does lead, something that can kind of deal with it or tank it pretty well, you can always just fire off a very fast Coaching into your ally. This is very, very good with the Ogerpons, in particular, like, the Hearth Flame. I've also seen, I think a fellow Australian player called Daniel Walker was pairing it up with T-Tar as well. So it was like DD T-Tar plus Coaching. And essentially what he would do is he'd just go like DD plus Coaching. All of a sudden, this like T-Tar becomes impossible to remove. You've got up the D-Dance, but now also you just still outspeed your T-Tar, so you can get a second Coaching off if possible. Then all of a sudden a +3 T-Tar is just throwing rock slides at you. And it's honestly pretty damn scary. But then this set here, this is just the Mystic Water set. Of course, on Mystic Water, we did slap on the Aqua Jet. And I did put Terra Poison here just as a kind of like, hey, if you want a defensive Terra, this is very good. I still do really like Mystic Water plus Terra Water personally. But if you do want like a bit of a defensive typing, Poison is definitely the way to go. I think Terra Poison is also very solid as well on the Choice Scarf variant. It really just depends if you feel like you need this one to really be able to live a hit from Flutter Mane. It always comes down to how the team is kind of structured. But yeah, if you feel like you don't really have answers to Flutter Mane, then Terra Poison is definitely an option. But if you're not too worried about your Flutter Mane matchup, of course, going for something like Terra Water here and just absolutely firing off, these massive surging strikes, obviously is fantastic. Then we have everyone's favorite kitty here, and that is Incineroar. Now, Incineroar obviously is, one of the best ones in the game. It is arguably the best support piece. I think right now, probably the second best support piece, just behind Ogerpon Wellspring. But in saying that, this one is absolutely fantastic. Now, these EV spreads here are all, a bit different. I am personally not a massive Incineroar fan, so I did kind of take some of these sets, from, just experience. Like, they're kind of just general guesses. It's nothing too crazy. With this set here in particular, we have Terra Grass plus Citrus Berry. Grass obviously is just a fantastic, defensive typing. Plus also, it gives you an immunity to things like Spore and Rage Paddle, which is obviously very nice. The 4 moves here are just the very standard 4 moves. Obviously, Blitz and Knockoff being your 2 main offensive moves. Fake Out just being, great utility, and Parting Shot as well, just being fantastic. In terms of the EVs here, this is just something I ran, super early on in the format. Basically, you hit the first bump on your attack just to make sure your blitzes and knockoffs actually do something. You basically run the HP up to an optimal, position for the Citrus Berry. Basically, you want a multiple of 4 when holding a, an item like Citrus Berry. So going to, straight for 200 rather than 202 obviously is very nice. I forget the exact, calc on this Spadev here, but I'm pretty sure this is like always living like a Terra Fairy Specs Moonblast or something like that. Obviously this, I've been using this for like almost a month now, so I figured exactly what it's for. And then really the defense speed, it kind of comes down to how you kind of want to run this. I do think going faster Incins obviously is very good because you don't want to be outsped by other Incins, except under like very, niche circumstances where maybe you're running something like Psy Spam Trick Room, and you want your own Incin to be slower so you can get those, slow parting shots and whatnot. Because obviously that is obviously fantastic on lead. The other set here though for Incin is just a, Safety Goggles plus Terra Water set. Basically, water is just a bit better defensively. It's just a fantastic neutral typing. And of course, now we lost our immunity to Spore and Rage Powder, so we just slapped the goggles on here. Moves don't change, but the build does just a little bit. Now, I believe I stole this one off of the VGC damage calc. I'm not exactly too sure what it does, but as you can see here, obviously, we've got a lot more special defense. Obviously, I think a lot of people are kind of abusing the fact that, like, Flutter Mane in the right situation can one-shot it. Like, I'm pretty sure a Specs Terra Fairy Moonblast next, like Chi-Yu, for example, can threaten a one-shot on it. And because of that, I do think the little bit of extra special bulk obviously goes a long way. And then really, again, it's kind of just, hitting that little bump on the attack here, but really just trying to speed creep what you want to speed creep. Going for 84 obviously outspeeds things like this, where I had it at 89, for example. So that's obviously definitely something to keep in mind here. And then this is just my Assault Vest set. I threw this one together. Again, I like a little bit of extra attack. Obviously, the speed is very solid. And because we're on the Assault Vest set here, we do, not really have much, investment into our Spadef. We've got more physical defense here. Did max out the HP, of course, because we don't have a berry. And then Terra Fairy is really just a cool Terra into things like Urshifu as well, because it gives you, that resistance to things like close combat, which is obviously fantastic. And then, of course, with the moveset here, we swapped out Parting Shot for U-turn because obviously we're Assault Vest here. And because of that, we want to be able to, obviously make sure we can actually pivot around. And I do think the Assault Vest set is very good. Obviously, it matches up much better into things like Flutter Mane and some of the other big special attackers, which I do think is very important, especially in the current metagame. Then we have Raging Bolt. Now, Raging Bolt, thankfully, I think is actually pretty damn simple in terms of its EV spreads here. So when I run my EV, my Raging Bolts here, sorry, I like to go for that 112 speed tier. Essentially, this just puts you in a pretty nice speed tier where you outspeed a lot of the things kind of creeping that 107, 108 range. But then you're also not really competing that much with like the 114s to 116s and even up to like 120, right? Special attack stat here is just hitting the third bump. You want as much damage as possible. And I'm a huge fan of 188 on Raging Bolt because I believe not only is this a, I believe it's a grassy terrain / leftovers number, but it also just matches up perfectly with, basically making sure you min-max, the efficiency of your defensive points here. Basically for anyone who I guess doesn't understand how, optimizing it works, or like, I guess, diminishing returns work in particular with the defensive stats. The second a defensive stat is more than half of your HP stat. Basically, you're getting less bang for your buck from each point. And because of that, you just split the defenses here, go 4 and 4. Obviously, 112 is half of 124. And 110, while it's not exactly half, is obviously very close. If you really wanted to, crack it, you could go something like that. But as I said, I like having that little bit of extra speed. And yeah, it just puts you in a position where this mon, has the safety goggles, has the Terra Electric to make sure the Claps and Thunderbolts are doing as much as you can. And you have a really high special attack stat. So obviously it's going to deal a lot of damage. But then we have the leftover set. As I said before, we like to hit that 128 because this is just really, oh, I lied. It's 124. I put the wrong points here. That's meant to be like this. Yes, sorry. Basically, this is the leftovers calm mindset with Terra Grass. Terra Grass, basically, as we said with Incin before, does the same thing as, the safety goggles does for us here. But yeah, again, we have the lefties. We're hitting that optimal spread here. We've gone to only the second bump on the special attack stat because we are going to be, you know, buffing this up with our carbon mines. And then really hitting the speed stat we want, kind of, you know, just getting to a nice area here on the Spadef. If you really wanted, you could even do something like this. Probably even something like that is maybe a bit better in hindsight. But yeah, you know, you want a little bit more defense just because obviously after a carbon mine, that's definitely this mon's weakest stat. And yeah, it just, you know, this is a mon where if it ever gets a carbon mine or two, it does a lot of goddamn damage. Another optional Terra for this one here as well is Terra Fairy, which we do have on the third set. But I do in particular really enjoy Terra Fairy on the leftover set. On this set here, though, this is just the booster energy spread here. The exact same spread as game 1. But really, it was just kind of here to say, hey, booster energy is good, but also Terra Fairy is an option. I do think on the booster energy set, Terra Electric is better. I just wanted to have Terra Fairy here, just in case I forgot it while I was telling you guys. But yeah, Raging Bolt, man, this mon's so bulky. It hits so hard. And yeah, with booster energy, Terra Electric, Thunderclaps, this mon just starts one-shotting a lot of things with a priority move, which is obviously very, very good. And we've seen D-Knight do that a lot. Now, speaking of D-Knight, this is another relatively simple mon to touch on. Now, the biggest issue you have when you're talking about D-Knights is essentially how to speed creep the mirror. There are people who say, hey, you know what, stuff it. I'm not even going to bother trying to speed creep the mirror. I believe, who was it? I think was it Alex Underhill? Maybe it was Chopper Cross. I forget. Someone was like talking about like EVing this mon to like make sure it lives, you know, E-speeds from opposing D-Knights. I don't know how easy that is personally. When I run my D-Knights, I normally go to around that 110 speed, max out the attack because obviously you want to deal as much damage as possible, especially if you are pairing this one with Chien-Pao, and then basically just pumping into the HP. Again, if you wanted, like I've seen people even run stuff like this, I think like 116, which obviously I think is definitely still pretty decent. End of the day, it really just comes down to your personal preference. Hit the speed tier you want to hit and then just dump it into HP, I think. This mod's already, you know, pretty decently bulky, so a little bit of HP, you know, obviously is very, very nice. But look, the beauty of D-Knight here is Terra Normal, Choice Banded, E-Speeds. You have Inner Focus, so you can't be faked out, you can't be intimidated. And this mon obviously just has a really, really good attack stat. Now, obviously, with the rest of the moves here, there are a lot of different options you can go for. I don't necessarily think this is like the 4 you have to go for, but I'll kind of explain everything and why I've, you know, kind of put it here. One, Outrage is a nuke. If you just start clicking Outrages and your opponent doesn't have a resist, or, you know, mainly an immunity, really, because I've seen this thing do like 60% to some golden goes. Sometimes even more. It's like an absurd amount of damage with Chien-Pao. So Outrage obviously is just a nuke. It can be, you know, very good at cleaning up late game situations. Aqua Jet is fantastic for picking up things like Flutter Mane. Sucker Punch from a Chien-Pao plus a Jet will just pick up most Flutter Manes. And Aerial Ace, of course, gives us, you know, just like another stab move. Obviously very, very good as well to things like a Moongus, because if you can get like a super effective Aerial Ace off, it does deal quite a lot of damage. But then we have the Assault Vest set here. Now, I've kind of thrown the other spread moves here that I think are good. I think it doesn't matter what set you're always running E-Speed, but really that's the only one consistent move you must have. Stomping Tantrum here gives you obviously a very good option into things like ground types, steel types, sorry, I meant. Fire types as well, which is obviously very, 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 very nice. Low Kick is just like mainly like a King Gambit, Tyranitar. It's just really, really nice to have. Even things like Roaring Moon, if they, you know, start picking up in the metagame, it's going to deal a lot of damn damage to it. And then, of course, I think really the bread and butter here of the Assault Vest set is the Terra Flying Terra Blast. Basically just having, you know, a base 80 power stab move that obviously gets buffed up here by the Terra Flying is just fantastic. And EVs, again, they're basically the exact same as what we just said. I would essentially just suggest running this to whatever speed tier you're comfortable with. Maybe because you aren't like banded, you could maybe drop a little bit of attack, but I really think this mon still does want to hit as hard as possible. Now we have Entei, which is probably the surprise of the metagame. Obviously, you know, Chien-Pao's new best friend, just a very, very good fire type. Obviously, that not only matches up really well into Flutter Mane, but of course, things like Incineroar. Now, the main thing really going for this mon here is obviously, you know, a very nice attack stat paired up with Sacred's Fire, but of course, Inner Focus, very similar to what we said about D-Knight. Can't be flinched, can't be faked out. I just said flinched and faked out. Can't be flinched, can't be intimidated, which is obviously very, very good. And again, it's just a fantastic Assault Vest mon, making this mon much better into Pokemon like Flutter Mane. Now, on this set here in particular, I've gone Terra Grass. I do think Terra Normal is also a decent option, but I'm a big fan of Terra Grass. I think Terra Normal is only good on the Choice Banded set, which we will talk about in a second. But I do think the bread and butters of this, you know, Entei set here is one, has Sacred Fire, which is just an absurdly broken move. A 50% chance to burn, especially in a metagame that's so physically orientated, obviously is very, very good. And then, of course, E-Speed is just fantastic at cleaning up things late game. Assault Vest plus Snarl is also really, really good for the late game as well. Obviously, not late game, sorry, Trick Room. Very, very good into like Side Spam, Trick Room teams. It's just fantastic. You're able to live one attack, get off a Snarl, and then all of a sudden, you know, you've got the +1 special defense. They've got the -1 special attack. Maybe you live that second hit from something like a Blood Moon, and now all of a sudden, you know, they're -2, and the game's basically done. And then Stomping Tantrum, again, just great, coverage on this one. It hits the, the steel types, it hits the fire types. It's just very, very solid, right? It's a pretty good all-round move. In terms of EVs here, we just wanted to bulk this thing out as much as we could, right? Obviously, it's a base 100, so we want a little bit of speed. But for the most part, really, we're trying to get as much HP as possible, get our attack basically up to that second bump, and then kind of just split it into the defensive stats. Now, obviously, we are Assaultless, but I do think, this one's, got pretty piss poor for special defense as it is. So getting it a little bit higher just to buff up that Assault Vest, I do think is very, very important. And then for this set here, this is the Choice Banded set. As I said, I think Terra Normal is the way to go in this set, just because obviously you want to buff up those E-speeds. Now, in terms of the build, this is something I'm always really tweaking with, because I do think a bit of bulk obviously does go a long way on a mon like this, but obviously, you're basically there to hit as hard as you possibly can. And when it comes to the speeds here in particular, I do think if you're running something like Banded Entei, you really want to pair it with something like, Boost the Bundle or Flutter Mane with Icy Wind, or even like a Tornadus with, say, like Tailwind plus Icy Wind, because I do think having that second form of speed control in like Icy Wind or Electro Webs is definitely very, very important. But I do think hitting this 152 is obviously very good, because things like Urshifu will hit 149, Iron Crowns will roughly hit, normally 150 unless they're going for the speed boost in themselves. And then, of course, a lot of mons will kind of speed creep to that 150 tier because of Urshifu and how worried they are about it. As I said, if you want, run this thing a bit bulkier, you can do what we did before, drop it down to like 116 attack, and then kind of just pump it into the HP and defensive stats. But I do think, a Choice Banded Entei with things like Terra Normal, E-Speed, Flare Blitz as well we've added, just because it's obviously a stronger move than Sacred Sword. Does go a long way. And this one is honestly, without a doubt, probably the best. I don't want to say the best fire type, because I think fire types are really good, but it's definitely up there as, a top 3 contender for the best fire type in the metagame. Now, we're getting down to our last 2 here, but before we end it off, of course, we have to talk about Rillaboom, which is a mon that is just absolutely great. This mon is just always fantastic. It feels like you honestly can't go wrong having a Rillaboom on your team. This mon obviously helps out a lot with side spam, because you can, obviously cycle around the terrain. Also, it just hits really goddamn hard. It's base 125 attack. It hits really hard, and it is one of the best Assault Vest users in the game. Obviously, we have Terrifier here, because I think Terrifier matches up perfectly with, Grass types in general. Woodhammer is an absurdly strong, stab move here, especially when paired with Grassy Terrain. Obviously, Grassy Glide getting, priority in terrain is obviously very, very nice. Then, of course, we have U-Turn and Fake Out. Now, Fake Out, I do think, is the third must-have move on this set. U-Turn can definitely be switched out for something like High Horsepower or Stomping Tantrum, depending how you want to run it. But yeah, they're definitely like kind of the options there. And then the build here, this is just very, very simple, right? This is the set I ran at Brisbane, very similar to what I was saying earlier. Basically maxing out the HP. Obviously, we're getting to that 116 bump. The reason I really like this here is because it basically allows you to always one-shot non-Terra Blood Moon Ursa Lunas that are max HP, unless, of course, they like kind of dump into their defensive stat, which I think is pretty damn bad. And then, yeah, we're just getting to a nice, round number here at 100 special defense. And then we're hitting that 114 speeds here. If you wanted, you can run that a little bit higher, but it's really just up to you at the end of the day. And then the other set we have here is just the Miracle Seed set. Now, obviously, I think this set here is definitely best paired up with things like Chien-Pao, but this is essentially just the Adamant max, max attack here. We got the Miracle Seed, we got the Terra Grass. We're basically saying, hey, our Grassy Glide's going to deal massive, massive damage. And of course, hey, maybe if you don't have speed control or if you're not threatening me, then the Wood Hammer is just going to deal ridiculous amounts of damage. This will pick up a lot of neutral mons. Like anything that is neutral to like a Terra Grass Miracle Seed Wood Hammer from this mon, especially in grassy terrain, it's going to take too much damage. I'm telling you right now. It's absolutely insane. I definitely think Rillaboom, obviously. Look, it's one of the best support mons we have in the game right now. It's terrain, it's Fake Out, it's Grassy Glide, it's Party, lots of damage. Fantastic mon here. I guess the EVs, this was just me really just kind of playing around. I think off the top of my head, 192 hits the, I believe the number for the grassy terrain, essentially, and then the rest is just put it to speed. I do think when you're running a set like this, you do want that little bit of extra speed, of course. Now, I don't necessarily think going something like max speed like this is like that good, because you don't really hit the speed tiers you kind of need to hit. And because of that, I do think something as simple as this is just the way to go. And then the final mon here is one of your boys' personal favorites, and that is Tornadus. Now, Tornadus obviously is a, pretty simple mon in the sense that, hey, this is the, this is the best Prankster Tailwind mon we have in the game, but it does have quite a bit of diversity in the different kind of sets it can run. Now, the first set we have here is just very, very simple. This is the Focus Sash Terra Ghost set. Essentially, you got the Sash there saying, hey, I'm going to run this more offensive. I'm going to, make sure I outspeed things like Ogerpon. I'm just going to deal a lot of damn damage with my Bleak Wind Storms, right? Then you've also, got Tailwind, of course. This one who's here basically to say, hey, I'm going to get up to Tailwind. I'm going to, be max speed. You're not going to be able to taunt me unless you're, a Whimsicott. And I'm just going to get it up, right? And then Icy Wind here, I think, is just a fantastic second option for basically speed control. It's just very, very good, right? It gives you a lot of answers into mons that, maybe they'll just like outspeed what your ally is. You protect the ally, you click the Icy Wind, all of a sudden now the ally is faster. And it's pretty damn good. And of course, Protect. I think Protect is very, very important on things like the Focus Sash sets. simply because you just want to make sure, like, hey, you know, maybe you're in a situation where you don't want to pop, you know, the focus sash on a, you know, sorry, the terror on a fake out. And because of that, you know, you just protect, stall out a turn, and then you go from there. The next set, though, here is the Covet Cloak set. Now, this is one of my personal favorite sets here. Covet Cloak, obviously, meaning you can't get faked out. And, of course, Terra Steel just basically is, you know, one of the best defensive typings, you know, for any mon, really, in the metagame. And the main changes up we have here, obviously, is we've added Rain Dance and Taunt. Now, Rain Dance is obviously just fantastic when paired up with things like Urshifu. That's probably something I didn't mention on the Focus Sash set here as well. If you do have something like an Urshifu Rapid Strike, or maybe you just want Rain in general, obviously definitely consider dropping Icy Wind for it. But on a set like this, obviously we've got the Rain Dance here, we've got the Taunt, which is really good into, you know, obviously a lot of support mons. Also not too bad into the mirror as well, especially if they don't go for, you know, the Tailwind turn 1 and you do. You can just then taunt them obviously on turn 2, and it's pretty damn good, right? Now, in terms of the, you know, the spreads here, essentially, you know, the speed is really just to kind of speed creep out the, you know, all those base, you know, 100s that are going like Modest and Adamant, making sure you out things like, you know, you outspeed, sorry, things like, of course, you know, the Urshifu Rapid Strikes and anything trying to speed creep that natural tier there. And then really the bulk, which is kind of a dump, right? I personally like running 44 special attack. Just gives you really nice rolls into a lot of the common threats. And then, of course, you know, max HP and then just putting the rest into defense, because this mon really just does not want to die to physical attacks. And you want to make sure too, even into things like, you know, the Power Knight combos, right? With Terra Steel and this much physical defense, really you can live things like, you know, Crash into E-Speed pretty comfortably. And then the final set here, though, is the Rocky Helmet set. Now, this is definitely the bulkiest variant of them all. This one entirely comes down to how you want to run it. Obviously, with Terra Steel, with Rocky Helmet, Bleak Wind, Tailwind, Rain Dance, the last move really comes down to you. I've put Protector. You can go for things like Taunt again. Icy Wind's obviously a decent option. Even, you know, another thing as well I didn't kind of mention here is this mon can also run Sunny Day, although I do think a lot of, you know, the mons that you'd want to pair Sunny Day with probably run better off next to Whimsicott. But this is the set I've got here. As I said, I like having a little bit of special attack on my mons. So I kind of just split the defensive stats, sorry, the speed and the spare def here, simply just because I like having, you know, those extra points basically to outspeed anything that's put in the 1 point. So like going to defensive numbers, you have to put 4 there anyway. I just make it even. And then really max that HP, hit the bump, and then pump it into the, you know, the speed, sorry, the special attack stat. One thing you could definitely look to go as well for if you wanted is just something like this maybe. Obviously, you know, giving yourself that little bit of extra physical defense, and obviously just dropping the attack. But as I said, I do like personally having quite a little bit of attack on my my sets here. So because of that, I did opt to, you know, run this here. But anyway, guys, that is the top 10 Pokemon in the metagame right now. Let me know what you think of it down below. Obviously, this is just my way to play them. I understand, you know, maybe my ways are a bit more general than others because I do a lot of testing. I haven't necessarily dived super duper deep into any of these sets, but I do think they are all very, very solid and very consistent. You can definitely take them onto the ladder and definitely do quite a bit of work with them as long as the team is built correctly. So yeah, of course, let me know down below what you think of them. And I guess also let me know, you know, what do you think is going to drop out of the top 10 come Charlotte? You know, as I said, we're only, I think at the time of recording this, like 2 days away. So by the time it goes up, if you're in America, actually it doesn't matter where you are, it's probably 2 days away. By the time you probably see this, if you're in Australia, it's probably a day away. But you guys get the gist of it. Anyway, yeah, let me know down below, guys. And yeah, I'll catch you to the next one. Peace.